The small town of Derwent sat nestled between sprawling hills and dense woods. It was the kind of place tourists flocked to for a taste of New England charm and the promise of untouched nature. With the rise of Airbnb, many of Derwent's homes had found new life as weekend retreats for city dwellers looking to escape. Karen and Paul, a couple from the bustling city of Boston, decided to spend their anniversary weekend in Derwent. They found a quaint little cottage on Airbnb, named Whispering Pines. The photos showcased a beautiful two-story wooden home surrounded by tall pine trees, its white picket fence giving it an aura of homely perfection. Upon arriving, they were welcomed by the chirping of birds and the fragrant scent of the pines. The cottage seemed to be exactly as advertised, except for a small, handwritten note left on the kitchen counter. "Dear guests, please refrain from using the upstairs bedroom during your stay. Thank you for understanding. Mrs. O'Connor, the host." Karen found it odd, but Paul brushed it off. "Maybe it's just under renovation or something," he mused. That evening, as they prepared dinner, they heard soft footsteps from above, seemingly coming from the forbidden room. They glanced at each other, a hint of unease in their eyes. "It's probably just the house settling," Paul tried to reassure Karen. But that night, as the two lay in bed, they were jolted awake by a shrill scream coming from the very room they were warned about. Both jumped out of bed, hearts racing. "It's just a dream," Karen whispered, clutching Paul's arm. But they both knew it wasn't. Curiosity soon overcame fear. The next morning, they cautiously made their way upstairs. The door to the forbidden room was slightly ajar. Pushing it open revealed an old nursery, the wallpaper yellowed with age. At the center stood a decrepit crib, a rusted mobile hanging above. In the corner, an old photo album caught Karen's eye. Flipping through its pages, they saw black and white photos of a baby, progressing to toddlerhood. The last photo, however, was chilling. It showed the same crib, but it was splattered in red. A newspaper clipping slipped out from the album, a report about a tragic accident involving a toddler and a nanny. That night, as darkness enveloped Whispering Pines, the cries began anew, echoing through the halls. Karen and Paul lay frozen in bed, drenched in sweat. "This isn't right. We need to leave," Karen whispered. But before they could act, the lights flickered and went out, leaving them in pitch darkness. A cold wind blew through the house, extinguishing the candles. The door to their bedroom creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a woman holding a baby. Screams filled the night. Days later, Mrs. O'Connor arrived to prepare the cottage for her next guests. Entering the living room, she found two untouched mugs of cold coffee and a note. "Dear Mrs. O'Connor, your home is beautiful, but we had to cut our trip short. We felt something unsettling. We hope to visit Derwent again in the future, but perhaps at a different address. Warm regards, Karen and Paul." She read the note and sighed, placing it with countless others of a similar nature. She knew the story of the old nursery, the accident, and the sorrow that forever haunted Whispering Pines. The house would be ready for its next guests, but she wondered, as she always did, if they would heed her warning. And upstairs, in the forbidden room, the old mobile slowly turned, its lullaby echoing through the silent halls. In the heart of the French countryside, the majestic Château de Pourpre stood tall, its red brick facade weathered by centuries but still holding an imposing presence. It had recently been listed on Airbnb by the elderly Madame Duval, who inherited it from her ancestors but no longer lived there. Sarah and Mark, newlyweds from London, discovered the listing while looking for a secluded honeymoon destination. The reviews for the Château de Pourpre were scarce, but it was the affordable rate and breathtaking pictures that convinced them to book. The chateau had a peculiar stipulation: avoid the room at the end of the south corridor on the second floor. It remains locked for a reason. Upon arrival, the estate seemed grander than the pictures. Vines clung to the walls, and the entire place had an air of regal abandonment. Their footsteps echoed as they wandered the halls, but there was a warmth, a familiarity that put them at ease. However, as night fell, Sarah's curiosity about the forbidden room grew. The massive oak door was locked, but a faint light seeped through the cracks. Whispers could be heard, hushed but urgent. Mark, ever the voice of reason, reminded her of the host's instructions. They retired to their chambers, but Sarah's dreams were invaded by visions of the room. In her dream, she saw herself approaching the door, the whispers growing louder, a melody, sad and haunting. She turned the knob, and a blinding light engulfed her. She woke up with a start, Mark's arm wrapped protectively around her. The next day, the couple decided to explore the town. They were greeted with warmth by the locals, but upon mentioning where they were staying, faces grew pale and conversations quickly ended. An old woman named Colette approached them discreetly, her eyes filled with concern. She spoke of a legend. The room housed the spirit of Isabelle, an ancestor of Madame Duval, who had died of a broken heart after her lover was killed in battle. Every night, she waits for him, playing their song and hoping he'll return. Colette warned them, if you hear the song, don't follow it. It ensnares. That evening, as the clock struck midnight, Sarah was awakened by the melancholic tune. Drawn to it, she found herself in front of the forbidden room, the door now slightly open. Inside, a ghostly figure in a flowing white dress played a piano, her fingers dancing gracefully over the keys. Mesmerized, Sarah stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving Mark, who had been trailing her, on the other side. Panicking, Mark banged on the door, calling out to his wife. Hours seemed like minutes, but the door finally opened at the crack of dawn. The room was empty, save for an ancient piano, now covered in dust, as if it hadn't been played in centuries. Madame Duval arrived shortly after, her face a canvas of sorrow. She confirmed Mark's fears. Sarah had become one of the many souls trapped within the room, lured by Isabelle's eternal lament. Mark left Chateau de Pourpre heartbroken, the haunting strains of the melody forever etched in his memory. The listing was taken down from Airbnb, but those who knew of the Crimson Manor always whispered of the bride who vanished, leaving behind only echoes of a haunting tune.